Yeah, folks, believe it or not, it's time for the final review of Hearthstone Cataclysm. We got a bunch of cards revealed today, and we're going to talk through all of them, including this cool new legendary Commander Geddon for Warrior, a 7-mana 7/7 elemental with Battlecry. Instead of drawing each turn, discover a card from your deck. It costs 3 less, and then you destroy the others. That's not the other cards from your deck. That's the other 2 choices from your discover here. So basically it kind of gives you an old school tracking at the start of every turn instead of drawing a card. And old school tracking was great. I know some people freaked out about destroying the other cards, but in most games, for at least the context of Hunter decks back in the day, it wasn't a problem because you never drew through your deck anyway. You were using the tracking to find the awesome kill command to end the game. Who cares if you burn some cards? They didn't exist functionally on average. So can you take a tracking of old and put it in Warrior today after turn 7 and still have a powerful effect, particularly when you discount that selected card? I think maybe, yeah, there's quite a few things to talk about here, right? Number one is this 7-mana 7/7 War Golem turn. That does suck. You're just skipping your turn 7. A lot of decks will not be able to do that. They will have to be rather defensively minded control decks, stuff like a Quest Warrior deck, where you know you can kind of do that safely without just falling over dead. So I think it might be tough to use this as the top end of, you know, maybe a more aggressive deck or a mid-range deck. They might not always have the space for this sort of thing. So then the question becomes, can a control deck utilize Commander Geddon successfully? They do often care about resources. They do sometimes play long enough games to actually get to the bottom of their deck, and destroying those cards could actually be a meaningful sacrifice of resources if you're not able to leverage this into an end game scenario via those discounts, particularly because like after turn 7, you might only have like 14, 15 cards left in your deck anyway, because you've just naturally drawn through so much of your deck already, and any additional card draw could be even less than that, really. So you might only have like 4 or 5 turns of Commander Geddon actually making an impact before you've just either drawn or burned the rest of your deck, which means, you know, in total 4 or 5 discounts of cards. How swingy can those discounts be, and how quickly can they recover? Because you spent 7 mana of a downturn, you need at least 3 turns to kind of make up that difference that you sacrificed in the first place just playing your 7/7. So there's this real, I don't know, you got to thread the needle here on like timing where this pays off enough and your deck lasts long enough and you don't run out of resources. Now, the one saving grace for this, of course, could be that once you run out of cards, you shuffle more in. So for instance, Quest Warrior is doing that with Latorvius Gaze of the City. You shuffle in all those remaining quest rewards and you have a little extra depth in deck. And then, of course, you're discovering quest rewards and discounting them by 3, which could be really nice. You know, that said, obviously you're also destroying quest rewards, which sometimes you wouldn't mind much if you just find like the mage quest and win the game. It won't matter. Other times, you know, you only get like kind of 2 turns, basically 2.5 turns out of your quest rewards, depending on how much was left in your deck when all that lines up. So there are just some questions about like, is this worth it? I don't know, actually. I don't know. I sort of feel like a lot of these decks just end the game anyway and get to a state where like if you've made it that far, you're probably safe. Is a 3 cost discount and a, you know, better draw on average gonna be worth it if you've already made it this deep into a game? And if you're kind of planning to go to turn 10 or 11 or 12 with this guy, I don't know if it's worth it. It feels kind of iffy to me. Like the more stuff you shuffle into your deck, maybe the more interesting this gets in those control decks, but there are also just win conditions that do it more decisively and sooner. And then even in the Quest Warrior world, it's like, you know, the win condition for that right now is Mage Quest plus Murazond Infinite. We get the infinite damage after you hit the Mage Quest. You could even like break that accidentally with Commander Geddon, where you get both of them in your Discover if you've played this, you know, while Murazond is still in the deck and you play your quest while it's all there. Like that could cause a problem. Like that's probably, you can kind of play around that a little bit. But then again, like why do you need this guy at that stage? Like what is this guy actually doing? Just play some card draw cards maybe, and you get there just as quick. So I don't know. It's like in a way it is kind of a tutor or deck thinner more so for your Mage Quest, because like you're deleting everything that's not the Mage Quest or picking the Mage Quest at the end of the quest chain, right? Like it could help you find your Mage Quest sooner, and it makes it 2 mana, which means you only need 11 mana for the Murazond Quest combo, which you would still need Ysera for because you no longer have New Heights and Warrior, but hopefully you'd have time to play Ysera. But now you're playing Ysera and Commander Geddon both as kind of dead turns. It's just, like, it's not impossible that it makes an impact, but like the more things I have to list for it to light up, the more nervous I get, right? So I do think there's a very, very narrow window of success for this card. That doesn't make it impossible, though. You know, it doesn't make it impossible. It just makes it a tough one and a really niche fit. And I think maybe only Quest Warrior right now makes sense for this. And I'm not even totally sure it makes the cut there, but I think it's right on the edge. All right, next up for Warrior, here's the Destructive Blaze, a 5 mana 3/3 elemental. After this survives damage, summon a Destructive Blaze. Death Rattle, deal 2 damage to a random enemy. So here we have yet another patron style card for Warrior, where you damage this, it summons a new one. That new one's going to be at full health. So if you have a chain of multiple damage cards, you know, Defile style cards or whatever, right? These are going to keep creating new ones and keep loading up the board. And then any that you kill off randomly, of course, after that chain continues, are going to start pinging the opponent as well with 2 damage, which we've already seen a pile of these cards dealing 2 damage to random enemies thanks to all the Ragnaros stuff and the soldiers there. This is yet another piece of that puzzle. We've also seen quite a few little AoEs and stuff as well that could work really well with this. I mean, just pulling up deal 1 damage right now in Warrior, right? You've got quite a few things to play into this. I mean, here's an Axe of the Forefathers, right? Load this up early. Here's a Searing Fissure, you know, here's another deal 1 all. Shellnado actually is kind of crazy, right? You like play a Destructive Blaze. If you have a Shellnado mana, it's expensive for sure, but you know, this is dealing 5. So, you know, there's quite a few ways here to like start pinging these off. I will say, like, you know, 5 mana is a big overhead on this. I think there are some cool turns, but it doesn't have like the crazy lethality of the old patrons, and it becomes this kind of like 2-step board thing that's like, you know, kind of about going face, but only 2 damage per instance doesn't really stack up that much or that fast. So it's like, how much mana do you have to spend to get 4 or 5 of these out where it starts to feel like the damage becomes really relevant? It's, you know, it's too much. Like the Shellnado example, right? It's 5 plus 4. Like, that's too much. Even loading up an Axe of the Forefathers and stuff early, that alone only gets you 2. So you need another follow-up. It's like, are you going to turn 6, turn 7, turn 8? How far into the game are you going to actually get a board out of these? I think it's going to be just a little bit too delayed on all of that. So I think that's really the challenge. When I misspoke and called this a 4 mana card, I wonder if that would really make a big difference on getting this one into some playable space. I think ultimately it's just competing against the rest of the Warrior set, which has felt really efficient, really powerful, really fast. And I don't know if this one like slots in quite as well with the rest of that. Of course, there's some things to think about, like, you know, buffs and health buffs and stuff to give this extra depth. But as it stands as a 3/3, like, it just can't do anything on its own. It really needs support, and that costs mana and cards. And I think that could be the downside on this one. Moving on over to Warlock here, we have Maloriak, a new 7 mana, 7/7 dragon that reads, after you discard a minion, summon a copy of it. So some more discard support here for Warlock, which we've seen a little bit of this being introduced into Cataclysm. You may recall we saw Disposable Acolytes and Duke of Below as new discard stuff. We've also got a few things floating around from before as well, right? Bygone Doomspeaker, Chrono Claws, and a few high cost discard cards as well. So not really a ton of this. We also did see actually the neutral card as well, which we could take a look at that guy real quick. The Gemstone Hoarder, choose a card in your hand to discard, right? So a few things here that do play towards discard in Warlock that could be a synergy. I think Chrono Claws in particular, right? If you play a Maloriak, if you have a Chrono Claws pre-equipped, so you don't have to spend mana the same turn, and you have a really nice high-cost minion in hand, you discard that high-cost minion. Maloriak basically allows you to get a copy of it instead of it being discarded. The challenge there is that, like, you know, okay, I still spent 7 mana to get the high cost minion, basically, right? With a free 7/7 attached to it. It's almost kind of like you're getting, you know, a 0 mana 7/7, or, you know, even if it's like a 10 cost minion, you're kind of getting a -3 cost 7/7 Maloriak here. And I think, you know, basically this has just got such a high upfront cost that it's going to be really hard to combo this out in a way where it's like a really satisfying board develops. You know, I'm seeing like I'm discarding one big guy and copying that. I want more, right? I want a way to discard 3 or 4 things to get a really big satisfying board. You know, the fact that this has to be on board for this effect and it's just such an expensive upfront cost, it's just really tough to work with, right? And ultimately at the end of all that, it's still just kind of a board. It's not even like you get battle cries or anything out of it either, right? It's nothing that allows you to really cheese other than cheesing stats, and it looks like it just takes a lot of work, man. It feels like I want this to be a 5 mana card or something so that I can do that a lot quicker and make that board more impactful. But it's 7 mana, it's just like it's going to be coming down so late. And if you have to spend mana to do the discard, suddenly you're looking at 8, 9, 10 mana turns that come down even later. And at the end of the day, it's still just dudes on board. So I just think this looks terribly slow and like right now really hard to support. Maybe we'll get even more discard stuff, but I don't know. This just feels very, very hard to utilize well, and it's never going to survive multiple turns in modern Hearthstone, right? Where you get future payoffs with lots of mana. So I just don't know how to use this guy. So next up here is the Ocular Occultist. One more discard tool here for Warlock. It is a 3/6 with Taunt and Battlecry. Choose a card in your hand to discard. So once again here, another hand choice like the Gemstone guy we just looked at here, but you get a 3/6 body on this one, which I do like this card. I think, you know, 3/6 Taunt, it's pretty nice to play on turn 3 for a discard deck. Again, though, like, you don't really want to wait till turn 10 to play these together, right? This card is not a saving grace for your Maloriak. Like, that's just not going to be worth it to wait until, even if you do also have the weapon equipped, like turn 10, it's just too far along to just be playing 3/6s and like randomly summon dudes from hand, right? It's just not going to be that impactful. And then you can just play whatever the big card you're copying is anyway, in theory, right? So cool card, good discard support card. I'm going to say the same thing I've said for the rest of the discard stuff. I don't think we have enough right now to make that a good deck. It feels like it's just a little bit too shallow, but I could certainly see them printing additional cards before all of these rotate where it's like, yeah, for sure. If we get 3, 4, 5 more discard things that are powerful effects and payoffs, I think right now in particular, you just need more good payoffs. Yeah, this is going to be a great enabler. It's really good, right? It's a 3/6 taunt. So like there is certainly potential here for this one. I see the lines. I do not see them on Maloriak. I think he's too expensive. All right, next up, we have a really cool legendary, Naspira Enthralled. 3 mana, legendary location, 5 durability, deal 1 damage. After you cast a fell spell, reopen. So you get to ping again, and then Death Rattle, summon Naspira Unshackled, which is a 6/6 beast that reads, after you cast a fell spell, get a random Naga, it costs 1. So basically more fell synergies here. If you're loading your deck with fell spells, you can essentially get, kind of a free 6/6 after you've burned through your location, and then a bunch of really cheap Naga. We're also going to look at a couple of the cards that kind of tie this together. Here is, for instance, a Naga that would be even cheaper. This would just pretty much always, guaranteed to be 0, basically, off of your Naspira. It is a 5/5 that costs 1 less for each fell spell you've cast this game. We've also got the Malevolent Mutant. Battlecry, choose a fell spell in your hand and get a copy of it. On top of that, there are also some other fell synergy cards in the game already, stuff like the Scorch Weaver here, right? Discover a fell spell, reduce the cost in hand by 1, which could really help cheapen some of the more expensive fell spells out there. We also got Fell Infusion this time around. Fellfire Blaze is another synergy piece, and there are actually more fell spells in Demon Hunter as well if you want to look at the pool. Kind of a mix, but some good new cheap stuff like Sigil of the Seas. Kind of some AoE and single target removal, not as like aggressively minded, but yeah, kind of a mix, and mostly cheaper, especially if you're discounting them. Even stuff like Aeon Rend or Workshop Mishap might be cheap enough. I'd be worried that the new card Flash Flood is still a bit too expensive. I don't know how that's going to fit in, but maybe you just need enough. Now, when you look at the Naga package, it's not actually a lot of Naga. A couple that are in the core set, I'm not 100% sure those are sticking. Emerald Dream, 0 Naga. Lost City of Unguro, 2 Naga, both of which are pretty decent hits. You might even get a Kindred off this because you got other Nagas in the deck. So this could be like, 1 mana 6/8 in stats, 1 mana 4/7 life steals insane. Time Ways, 0 Naga. I think I got my filters right on this, by the way. Yeah, I think so. And then Cataclysm has 2, one of which heralds your Ashara and the other which is Ashara. And you should be able to generate Ashara off this. Colossals so far have only had the rule that they can't be randomly summoned on board, but they can be randomly added to hand, which means your Ashara is like a 1 in 7 or something right now. I didn't count right, but like there aren't that many Naga. It might be like 1 in 8. And if you're getting like 3 every time you unload your Naspira, there's a decent chance you get a 1 mana Ashara Colossal off of this pretty often, which even when it's not fully heralded is a solidly great play. Assuming you have board space, but you should have a little bit. Even if you have followed up on next turn, still insane. And you're gonna get stuff to herald it. One of the herald spells is a fell spell as well. So I could see this like fell Naga Ashara package coming together where sometimes you just pop off with this and get a crazy like Ashara plus board on turn 5. You could theoretically get 2 Asharas, frankly. You know, it's nothing stopping you. So there are some crazy high rolls off of this, and I think they're printing enough support that this deck kind of comes together, man. I kind of believe in this. I think it's pretty cool. Also, just I like the look of this guy a lot. So surprisingly promising card, particularly right now while that Naga pool stays low and increases the average quality by a lot. So next up here is the Ravenous Fell Fisher, a 6 mana 5/5 Naga, costs 1 less for each fell spell you've cast this game. So one of these classic discounters over time. I think this one's pretty solid. You know, we saw enough fell spells there in the kind of 1 and 2 range that by even like turn 3 or 4, you might be playing this as like a 2 mana 5/5 that just fills in. Anytime you top deck it late, it's just going to be a 0 mana 5/5 you get to splash into any given board alongside your Naspiras or whatever. Also a good minion to exist in that Naspira pool because it's always going to be that 0 mana 5/5 you just get to play out for free. So yeah, I think this is exactly the kind of glue card you need to bring one of these decks together, where it just gives it this power spike on occasional games and turns that really feels like it turns the tide while getting to some of that other power spike stuff, maybe like your Herald Ashara package, maybe like your Naspira pop off. This looks pretty good. Next up is the Malevolent Mutant, a 3 mana 3/4 Naga with Battlecry. Choose a fell spell in your hand and get a copy of it, which I think would be a really nice way to generate some cheap fell spells, in particular to enable all of these other cards. You're not that excited about a 3 mana 3/4, but you know, generating some resources that are very synergistic with your deck, that certainly makes sense to me. You just need enough, you know, fell spells to do what you're doing. It also might let you run a kind of tighter pool of fell spells where you don't feel like you have to run as much junk that doesn't fit your game plan, or maybe you don't have to drift into quite as expensive of cards, and you can keep things a little bit tighter on the low cost, high synergy stuff and just use a card like this to make sure you still have enough fell spells. So between just regular random value generation, well, not even random, you're picking it, regular value generation and you know, synergy fit, I think actually, yeah, this is again a pretty nice card for that deck. Maybe not the most powerful piece of it all, but certainly fits. Moving on to the Blackwing Experiment for Death Knight here. This is a new 2 mana Frost Rune card, 3/1 Undead Dragon with Death Rattle. Get a 2-cost spell that deals this minion's attack damage. So basically at a base, you just play this out. You got 3/1 that gives you a Frostbolt, effectively. It doesn't freeze, but you know, the classic 2 mana deal 3 recipe, which I think is already kind of okay. I think I'm running that sometimes. Like, I don't mind that at all. It's just a body on board that's generating me some damage. I'm pretty cool with that. Like, that's fine. But we do have this attack buff package we saw earlier that I actually was a part of the reveal for with Death Knight, where we're getting a lot of cards that reward you for buffing attack and or buff attack, right? So stuff like the Chromatic Broodmother and the Gruesome Nightmare we saw earlier, where you're just trying to get some extra attack buffs. The Command Claw is also a great example. I could see, you know, like coin this on turn 1, play your Blackwing Experiment on turn 2. This is a 5/1 on board, which, you know, sometimes that alone is annoying and scary, and opponent's like, God, I just can't let that hit me. But it's also going to give you a 2 mana deal 5 in hand, right? Practically a 2 mana Fireball, 2 mana Lava Burst, you know? So I don't know, man. I think it's just a really nice card again, and I already thought Chromatic Broodmother and Gruesome Nightmare were pretty cool. Lots of ways to potentially buff this, both on board or in hand. So you know, even if it doesn't actually get to attack with its attack, which would normally be like the risk exposure on this card, the fact that it's passing back all those buffs again into damage in hand still feels like it'll be worth it. So, you know, even if you play this like Gruesome Nightmare or whatever on turn 5, it's like, well, that's never going to get to attack as a 6/1. It's like, okay, that's fine. I'll just get the 2-cost Fireball in hand, and I'm still happy. This like still created something of value for me, while also, you know, still putting it on the opponent to deal with it and solve this problem on board. So ultimately, I think this card looks really good. Moving on to Chow Down. This poor Tauren dude on board. 8 mana double Unholy card here. It's going to summon 5/5/4 undead drakes. And then you can spend 8 corpses to give them rush. So potentially here, you know, a nice big board development / board clear tool, depending on how you need it. Probably a combination of both. And also just a big way to spend corpses, which, you know, spending corpses certainly can be a valuable tool in and of itself. I think the question for me on this card just comes down to cost, right? 8 mana is very expensive. That double Unholy rune in particular also gives you some pause, because a lot of the double Unholy decks have been a little bit faster, don't necessarily even go to a turn 8 very successfully. So it's like, where is this going? Like, what is the deck that's running this, and why do they need this tool? Because it's not really a threatening board development on turn 8. Like, pretty much any way at that stage will deal with this, or just ignore it and not care because they're doing some crazy combo that's going to kill you. And then as far as like removal is concerned, this is also kind of a weird, perhaps ineffectual removal for 8 cost as well. It doesn't really hold up that well. I mean, if they had a board of exactly 5 5/5s, you know, like, okay, or maybe 5 3/5s would be perfect. That'd be a dream to leave some behind, but I don't think it's really that good at either of those things. It's pretty prohibitively expensive. It's got some weird runes. I think that means this card's going to just fall short in a couple different ways. Next up, we're heading over to Druid with the Iridescent Flitterwing, a 5 mana 4/5 dragon. It's got elusive, and at the end of your turn, give your other minions +1/+1. So a token Druid follow-up here with a little board buff. Theoretically, one that's kind of sticky with that elusive tag. Like, you would maybe hope this survives multiple turns. I think in reality, in modern Hearthstone, that's just not that likely. A lot of rush minions or board clears potentially here. More problematic for this card, though, to me, might just be the nature of this buff, where, you know, it's an end of turn buff, so it doesn't lead to any immediate aggression. It's more about like stabilizing a wide board as opposed to turning it into lethality, which, if you've already got a board going into turn 5 with this, you already had a stabilized board that the opponent failed to answer, and then it's like, well, how much difference does this really make as a follow-up, right? Just a little bit, but I might rather just try to turn the corner and work on ending the game, or maybe develop some like stickiness, you know, a Soul of the Forest style card that's less about the front half of the minions and builds layers of your board, so that if they do open up a removal on their turn 5 or whatever, they finally hit the Brawl, which I know, again, Brawl's not in the, it's going to rotate. It's the classic example, right? If they finally hit their mid-game removal, you're kind of immune to it, as opposed to the 1/1 buffs. Probably wouldn't change that much very often. It's probably was just a lack of access, not a lack of damage output. So I don't know. I do think Token Druid's getting a lot of support here. They're going to need bodies post-rotation. This could maybe slide into the bottom of the deck, but I have a feeling this one gets cut because it just feels a little too slow and a little bit passive on that buff. You might want things that feel a little bit more immediate or defensive in slightly different directions. So I could see the Iridescent Flitterwing getting left behind. Moving on here to the Crystal Spine Cub. This is a 1 mana 1/2 beast, and it reads, whenever you spend your last mana crystal, gain +1/+1, which I think if you play this on turn 1, I think it'll work. It's like on, I don't actually know. I need to see it in action. Surely it would, right? Like, that would be the fun design, but maybe that's too broken because it's like a 1 mana 2/3. Like, would they print a 1 mana 2/3 if you could just play this on turn 1? Or does it have to be like you go into turn 2 and you spend your last mana crystal on turn 2? Because it, like, you know, have you spent the mana before this is on board, or do you spend the mana as soon as this enters the board and this text line is active? I don't know. I kind of think it should work on turn 1. Like, when is the mana actually spent? It's not spent until the card enters the board, right? And if it's on board, the text is out. I'm going to say it's a 1 mana 2/3, which is nuts. And then of course it can actually get bigger because it's very unlikely to be answered on turn 1 as a 1 mana 2/3. You know, most decks won't do that. So then you go into turn 2, even if you just hero power, right, this becomes a 1 mana 3/4, and it just starts scaling turn after turn. Is that too powerful? Like, that seems crazy strong. Assuming this card actually buffs itself on turn 1, I think this is really good. It might still be okay even if it doesn't. It might actually still be a pretty solid card if it just starts getting buffed as soon as you spend your mana on turn 2. Either way, though, this could actually be a nice scaling body in a low-cost deck. Like, this could be a crazy strong aggressive opener, particularly if you're not on coin, right? Like, I think, although if you are on coin, I guess you could for sure guarantee it gets buffs on turn 1. But I think just, you know, having that initiative where you use your 2/3 or 3/4 even to trade in to the opponent's early minions could really start to snowball. So I think potentially this is nuts, and maybe even if it doesn't work as well as we want, still pretty good. Moving on to Moss Binding here, 2 mana nature spell. This one summons 2 1/2 golems, and then you spend all your mana to give them +1/+1 for each mana spent. So on turn 2, you're just getting, you know, 2 1/2s, which isn't really that terrible for a token deck. Might be fine to do that sometimes, just set up for later. On turn 3, right, you would get 2 1/2 golems, but you'd have 1 mana left. So you would then turn them into 2/3s. So you'd get 2 2/3s for 3 mana. On turn 4, you would get 2 3/4s for 4. Turn 4, you would get 2 4/5s for 5, right? I think the sweet spot there is probably like 3 mana, maybe. You know, but I do like that this could like fill in the gaps later, right? Like, there's still moments where you just need stuff to do later, and it's like, yeah, I don't really have much else to do. I'll just get a couple Yetis on board or whatever, right? like, yeah, a couple Yetis isn't perfect, but it's fine. I just need to reload, and like, this offers that flexibility while I think still being like a pretty good development tool early in the game as well. So, you know, a token druid deck, which again, we're getting a lot of support for, it's just going to need stuff to do. I think this is pretty solid option of stuff to do that can fill in some gaps. Moving on next to Forest's Gift. This is a 2 mana nature spell. Give a friendly minion +1/+1 for each minion you control, which actually kind of inverse to that first Flitterwing card we saw. I like that this one can turn your wide boards into higher pressure and immediate damage. If you have like 4 minions on board, you know, this becomes a 2 mana 4/4 buff, which allows you to push that damage now, right? And it also kind of allows you to create slightly different shape to your board so that you can have like one tall threat alongside maybe some wider, shorter threats. So that if your opponent does go for a damage-based AoE, you know, suddenly they have like one big guy left behind that didn't get cleaned up. Whereas with a card like Flitterwing, again, you know, you're keeping everything sort of symmetrical. Sometimes that makes it easier to wipe those boards out unless they get exactly above the break point of the AoE and all survive. But, you know, sometimes they just leave you with nothing. And that's why I want to talk about kind of shifting the focus, talk about pressure, and talk about like survivability, all of which I think this card actually does do pretty effectively for 2 mana. So it wouldn't have the like long-term upside of the Flitterwing, but honestly, it gives the same amount of stats if you look at it, minus the stats of the minion itself, right? So as far as like buffing your board, this is sort of more immediate and more impactful, I think, in many cases. Also, some things do care about being bigger in particular because they have some other effect or scaling or whatever. So having a target on this can actually even increase that utility additionally. So I think this is actually a pretty nice little card as a good follow-up, a good, you know, pressure piece for a token deck. Moving on over to Rogue, we have Agent of the Old Ones, a 1 mana 2/1 demon. Battlecry, choose a card in your hand to transform into a coin. So coins are great. We love coins. They make a lot of sense in Rogue in particular, doing things like setting up combos. We've even had some cards that just interact directly with coins in the past and may have more of those in the future for sure. I do, though, wonder, like, having to replace a real card for a coin does come at some cost. You know, I can't imagine a deck that's like generating literal junk that you then, you know, like, oh, I don't need this piece of junk in hand, whatever. Randomly generated card of a different class that's like 8 mana and I can't use it. So, you know, I'm a thief deck that's just making a bunch of stuff and it's like, I don't need this. So turn that into a coin. It's a kind of neat idea. Probably not something you're doing on turn 1, but maybe you could weave this in later. In theory, you know, sure, I would much rather have a coin than some random, you know, synergy 8 cost spell that I'll never use in my thief deck, but it's like also not really that good of a plan, and I don't really think Thief Rogue's coming together very well either, based on everything we've seen so far. So it's like, yeah, it's kind of fine, but also why and when? You know, if a strict coin synergy deck comes along where coins do something really cool, a la like, you know, Wishing Well or whatever it was before. Is that what it was? Wishing Well, I think, right? Is that the card I'm thinking of? Oh god, yeah, Wishing Well, right? Like if this card comes back, sure, right? Yeah, maybe. Other than that, I think this one's gonna have a hard time. Moving on to the Chaos Supplicant, a 4-mana 3/5 for Rogue. After you cast a spell, cast a random spell of the same cost from another class. And boy, I think this is just hot garbage. This is just awful. It's so bad. You got this 4-mana overhead. You got to just plant this 4-mana 3/5, right? And then after you cast a spell, you're just it's auto casting a random spell from another class, which is usually going to go worse than better. You're going to fireball your own guy here half the time, right? Like you're just going to get results that make no sense for the game state, game plan, but also you had to spend 4 mana in order to do it. If this were 4 mana and it said, you know, get a random spell of the same class that costs 0, then you might have a little more interest because you could play it safely, right? You could bank it. You could save it for a key moment. But when it's just throwing it out there randomly, like God knows what you're going to get. And like the price is already so expensive anyway, there's just no reason or world to play this. Like maybe some weird manipulations with 0 cost spells specifically. If there's some class that has perfect 0 cost spells and you had a coin, maybe, but I think that's incredibly unlikely and won't be any good because how good could a 0 cost spell really be, right? So at the end of the day, this just looks really bad to me. Moving on to the Twilight Mistress. This is a 9-mana 4/12 dragon with Battlecry. Return all enemy minions to their owner's hand. So it is the Sapper Dragon. You just get to sap the entire enemy's board, which, you know, of course, we know if their hand is too full, some of those minions could also just get destroyed forever if they don't fit in hand. Often that could also burn a card. So, you know, we've seen that vanish style effect. Just keep in mind, this is only enemy stuff, not your stuff. It might actually be nice sometimes if it bounced your stuff back for those little bounce effects sometimes, but also sometimes it's nice to keep your board. So it just depends on the deck and scenario. So this is effectively a good board clear, right? It's just that kind of universal board clear, but it is 9 mana, which is tough, especially for a class like Rogue. It's really tough to play a big 9 mana card like this. I think, you know, if this were a priest or a warrior card, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I think they control deck could squeeze this in as they're like just big solve any problem kind of card, particularly because it deals with like death rattles and stuff well, unless again, of course, the hand is too full and the minion dies. I think the death rattle still procs, but you know, solve anything kind of cards are great in those big control decks like that because they have space to run these in their deck list. Rogue historically does not. I don't expect them to anytime soon. It just does not really fit the class game plan all that well. So I do think I think this card's going to struggle. Next up for Rogue is Daze, a new 3-mana shadow spell. This one returns an enemy minion to its owner's hand, so sap, but also they can't play it next turn. So a bit of a sap here with a delay. You know, so this is again a removal card for all intents and purposes. Of course, they could replay that thing later, but usually opponents don't really want to play like, you know, a thing they played on turn 3 or 4 or whatever, if that's when you're using it, and they don't want to come back on like turn 5 or 6 and replay that same card. Sometimes they can, but usually there's enough value generation, enough cards in hand these days in Hearthstone. Opponents don't really need to revisit the same stuff from earlier unless it's just like an insane legendary or something. But you could also control what you're hitting with this, right? You don't pick the card that has an awesome battle cry they want to replay again. You pick the big annoying stats or whatever that maybe aren't as efficient to get down later in the game, and this becomes a bit of a stall or a freeze style effect that, you know, it forces the opponent to commit more mana if they want to get that sort of effect or card back on board later. So is it worth it for a 3-mana removal card like this? I think it's okay. Yeah, I don't think it's great, but, you know, 3-mana remove a thing, solve a problem is fine. Sap was certainly a good card in its era. I think Sap would still be a good card today. I actually really wish this were just 2 mana. I think it could be, frankly, and it wouldn't be totally nuts necessarily. So, you know, I think it's fine. Next up here is Mage with the Winter Spring Whelp, a 1-mana 1/2 dragon with Battlecry. Discover a 1-cost spell from any class. And yeah, I like this a lot, right? Just a little body you throw down, get a thing. You know, other class can be a bit surprising or hard for the opponent to predict in some cases, but you know, usually since you're getting to pick, it's going to be something rather nice for you that that works out, you know, completely fine. Keep in mind, you know, keeping a small like damage spell in hand. We got stuff like Archmage Calic as well. Sometimes just generating these spells and then buffing them with spell damage later could actually add up rather nicely. When we look at 1-cost spells currently in the pool, you know, you'll see good cards and bad cards, and of course some of these also rotate, but it almost doesn't matter because it's like, even if it's not good right now, there will still be moments where you have good stuff, right? Like just on average, a lot of these will find some utility. Deadly Poison notwithstanding, that one might be hard to make work, but a lot of these, you know, will be fine. I guess also are quests in the pool? I don't know. I think they won't be, but actually quests would kind of pollute the pool and make life bad, but I don't think they're in the pool for that. So, you know, you'll find something you like, and it's just a body on board. This is a good little card. Moving on to Arcane Flow, yet another 4-cost Shatter card that seemed to really be their spot for Shatter. This one's an arcane spell that reads Shatter, deal 4 damage and deal 2 damage to all enemies. So, you know, this, when it enters your hand, will split in 2. You'll have 4 mana, deal 4, which is not great. Not great. I mean, if it's lethal, right? But not great. And you have 4 mana, deal 2 to all enemies, which is basically old school Consecration. Also, really not as great these days. Consecration did get a buff. So, 2 iffy, like not unplayable, I'd say, but 2 iffy cards. And then when they go together, right, much better. This is certainly playable then, you know, like deal 6 to face, clean some stuff up, deal 6 to a minion, clean up the fodder. That's fine. I don't think actually insane as a 4 mana combined card, for the record, just good. But that leaves you in a weird spot because like it's not that great separate. It's like Mage in particular, class that often has big hands, generates a lot of stuff. It's going to take a while sometimes to combine these. I think that's shaky. I think that's tough. This does though do pretty well with spell damage like we talked about. I also wonder if these are split and then you play Archmage Calic and they both get spell damage +1. When they combine, do they then have spell damage +2? Because it remembers both and combines them together. If so, that's actually pretty sick because then it's deal 6 and deal 4, which would be pretty nuts. That might be the use case for this card, and it's going to make me bump this up a little bit in score. I still don't think it's like a dream, but would be pretty fun. Moving on here to the Conjuration Specialist, a 3 mana 3/4. Battlecry, choose a spell in your hand and then split it into 2 random spells of the same cost. When I first read this, I thought it was like Divergence in Warlock, and I was like, oh my god, this is nuts. Just get 2 of my awesome big spell and it costs half as much. That's broken for only 3 mana. But then I saw this tricky little word here, random spells. Oh, it's taking your 8-cost spell and then splitting it into 2 random 8-cost spells or whatever, or 1 cost, you know, whatever it is, right? So it's just taking a card you like probably and turning it into 2 cards that you maybe don't like. And I think that's really tough. I don't think decks are going to value spells in hand enough to give up something they appreciate and enjoy and probably discovered or ran in their deck for just 2 random things. I think there's really no reason to do that, particularly not paying 3 mana for something I'm not even sure you really like the results of. Moving on to our final class today, it's Shaman with Air Support, a 5 mana 5/5 with Battlecry. Give a friendly minion Mega Wind Fury, but it can't attack heroes, which, man, that's pretty tough. So we did see some like attack synergy things in Shaman where, you know, if you attack a bunch, you get this 9 mana spell, card draw spell that gets discounted, right? So you're thinking, oh, Mega Wind Fury lines up really well with Muradin's Last Stand, right? I get 4 attacks, but keep in mind, the card can't attack heroes, which means you have to be able to actually attack into minions. How often can you attack into minions 4 times? Like in 1 turn, right? Like, number 1, there might not be enough minions to attack 4 times. Number 2, you might die because you just can't take that many value trades on board. So really having Mega Wind Fury when you can't attack face as an outlet doesn't really help because you're just not often going to get that many attacks. Not to mention you have to spend 5 mana on that. It's going to be really tough for this to make any sort of sense. There are theoretically, like, you know, just a giant lifesteal card or something where that sticks and you get to use this to heal a bunch. Like, sure, there are moments, but you can't really build those into a deck all that reliably when it costs 5 mana in order to set this up. And I don't really think this synergizes well with the rest of the package. So ultimately, this card looks pretty darn weak. Next up is the Storm Binder. I like this one, a 4 mana 7/7, a classic recipe for Shaman. Death Rattle here, unlock your overloaded mana crystals, and this one is going to overload you 3. So we have had a little bit of this overload Shaman stuff floating around. Not so much in this newest Cataclysm set. We got a little bit with the like Ceremonial Clash card that's a 4-drop spell. But in the last set in particular, we did get some overload stuff. You may remember I tried to build an overload Shaman deck. I think it was maybe after the mini set, right? We've got, you know, these big kind of rocket hoppers, Winged Aberration, right? We got the Haywire Hornswogg as the big payoff for all of these, right? So you're kind of getting yourself this little overload package. And this is definitely a nice piece of that, where the opponent is basically saying, hey, you're either going to hit me with a 7/7 or I'm going to clear off your overload and you just get to keep going for the next turn, which is a nice little dilemma, but it does still leave you sometimes, you know, like a 7/7 on board's nice, but a dead turn 5 where you only got 2 mana does suck. So I will say, like, you know, this would be good in an overload deck if that comes together. I still don't think there's enough pieces right now. This is one I'm going to park for a minute and say, hey, I don't think this gets played today at all. 6 months down the line, year down the line with more expansions, more overload support, maybe you might actually finally get that critical mass to make the deck. Right now, I don't think it's enough. And then our final card here is Ascendance. This is a 4 mana nature spell. Transform all friendly minions into ones that cost 1 more, and then they summon the originals when they die. So pretty cool follow-up here. This is both an evolve and like a Soul of the Forest style effect, where you're probably building a pretty nasty board out of this as long as you have a few things on board. So, you know, taking some little tokens or whatever, turning them into 2 or 3 drops, but then, you know, the opponent kills them, you got some 1 or 2 drops left behind, which is a nice little follow-up. I do like this kind of follow-up at this stage of the game, where if you can just get 3 or 4 things down, you know, it becomes a real headache for your opponent. You probably need more follow-ups than this to actually turn that into lethality. So you might need either a full Evolve Shaman package to kind of double down on all this, although a second Evolve layer is not necessarily good if they've got this Death Rattle or they're summoning their originals that said, you know, they will eventually die. You could trade them in or whatever and do it again and kind of keep a chain going with either 2 of these or other effects. Or you might need more token support where you have, you know, Bloodlust style follow-ups and you can either get stats or lethality that way. I don't know if that all comes together just yet. Another one where I'm saying, like, yeah, I don't think this is there today, but I do think this has a lot of raw power to it. So if they go for another Evolve Shaman line, which is funny because we're getting like multiple different kind of decks all printed here at once, and like maybe future support being teased or whatever. It is, again, a promising card if that happens. So all that said, let's go ahead and rate these cards from 1 to 5 stars. Commander Geddon is a 3-star card. Destructive Blaze is a 2-star card. Maloriak is a 2-star card. Ocular Occultist is a 4-star card. Nespira Enthralled is a 4-star card. Ravenous Fellfisher is a 4-star card. Malevolent Mutant is a 3-star card. Blackwing Experiment is a 4-star card. Chow Down is a 2-star card. Iridescent Flitterwing is a 2-star card. Crystal Spine Cub is a 4-star card. Moss Binding is a 3-star card. Forest's Gift is a 4-star card. Agent of the Old Ones is a 2-star card. Chaos Supplicant is a 1-star card. Twilight Mistress is a 2-star card. Daze is a 3-star card. Winter Spring Whelp is a 4-star card. Arcane Flow is a 3-star card. Conjuration Specialist is a 1-star card. Air Support is a 1-star card. Stormbinder is a 3-star card. Ascendance is a 3-star card. And that is Hearthstone Cataclysm review complete. Let me know what you guys think about these last few legendaries. I think this card's really cool. I think I just really like the art and look of this character a lot and the colors and stuff. Like, I think this is fantastic art and a sick looking character, but I'm also kind of sold on the effect too. Geddon does leave me a bit puzzled though. I don't know. We'll see how this one feels, but share your thoughts on all these cards down below. Tell me what decks you're most excited to play, because I think I will be playing them in the theory crafting event. So always good to know what you guys want to see. That said, thanks much as always for joining me, and until next time, game on.